We don't like to talk about trauma. We don't like to talk about these things. Why? Because we think that, the situation is gone, so we should have dealt with it already. We should be over it. We have this tendency to not want to talk about the trauma that has happened to us. I was talking to someone the other day who was talking about how, in their family was a history of sexual abuse. From generation to generation to generation, it continued and continued and continued. Why? Because no one bothered to open their mouth. No one bothered to say, listen, this is happening. This is what has happened to me. Why? Because we've trained each other, especially in certain societies, we've trained each other not to talk about these things. Why? Because we don't want to admit that these things have happened to us. We don't want to admit that this is true. We don't want to have to come face to face with the fact that something has happened, something atrocious has happened. We don't want to come face to face with the trauma, and so we bury it. But what we don't realize that when we bury these things, when we internalize them, when we don't talk about them, we cover them. And we try to pacify them as if, it's no big deal. It doesn't really matter. Maybe something I did, maybe I deserve to be raped. Maybe I deserve to be molested because of something I did. Maybe I deserved it, or maybe I warranted it. We don't like to talk about these things because the trauma is so real, and when we talk about them, it's like living the experience all over again. It's like walking through that same experience again, where you hear the sights and you see the sounds and the memories come rushing back to your mind of what happened. And we don't want to deal with that pain. We have a tendency to cover the pain so that we don't have to deal with it. Why? Because we don't like pain. Anybody here enjoy being in pain? No. We don't like pain. We don't like how it feels. We don't like what it does to us. We don't like the fact that the tears come coursing down our cheeks and we can't help it. We don't like the fact that we feel that our heart has been broken and we just want to weep and cry because we just don't know what to do because we feel so out of control. We don't like to be in pain. And so we cover up these situations. We cover them. We put a nice little blanket over them. Say, you know what? Listen, it's okay. Well, it's done with. It's over. It's okay. But we cover the transgression. We cover the problem. But by covering a problem, that doesn't get rid of the problem. Simply covering up the truth does not make it go away. But when we cover the truth, we don't give healing a chance to take place. For any good psychologist will tell you that one of the best ways to heal after trauma is to go back to the place where it has happened. The best way to deal with the trauma and deal with a traumatic situation is to go back to the place where you've suffered that trauma so that you can see where it is, so that you can recognize it and acknowledge it, and from there you can move on. But as skilled as you think you are of covering a transgression, as skilled as we think we may be for covering our past, until we actually deal with it, we can't move forward. Until we deal with the situation, until we deal with the hurt, until we acknowledge what has happened, we look face to face at what has happened, we can't move forward. We may look on the outside as if we're well put together and that we're okay and that we're functional, as we call it. But yet we can't grow, we can't progress. Why? Because there's a hindrance that keeps us back. There's that elephant in the room, so to speak, that keeps us back from moving forward down the road. Jacob, in this situation, he was traveling down the road and he was going to his father's house, and he had not quite made it to his father's house, but on the way there was a roadblock. But because Jacob was able to face the situation, because he was able to acknowledge it, he was able to get past the situation. Because Jacob was able to look at himself and say, listen, this is who I am. Because Jacob didn't try and cover the situation or try to, make pretty, be like, well, it's my mother's fault that my name is Jacob because she's the one who gave me the name. It's somebody else's fault. But because he was able to acknowledge who he was able to move forward. Church, too often we cannot move from where we are because we do not acknowledge who we are. Why? Because it's traumatic for us. It's difficult for us. We don't want to come face to face and look in the mirror to say, I'm a transgressor, I'm a pathological liar. We don't want to look at ourselves and say that this is who we are. We don't want to acknowledge it. Why? Because the situation is traumatic. It hurts us to be able to think that we've caused hurt to other people. It hurts us to be able to think that we could be capable of such underhanded sneakiness. It hurts us that we think to think that we could be capable of ripping down our brothers and our sisters. For we know those things are wrong. We know that we not ought to do them. But yet, until we can recognize who we are, we can't move forward. It may seem as if we're making progress, but we keep running in circles. For you see, Jacob thought that he was making progress when he sent the gifts to his brother. He thought he was making progress when he prayed, and he prayed earnestly, for he prayed earnestly when he prayed. He thought he was making progress when he took all these steps to cover up what was happening or what had happened. He thought he was making progress. But he wasn't making progress. Why? Because the battle wasn't against his brother. It wasn't about what his brother had done or about anything else. But the progress that he needed to make was to face who he was and to acknowledge it so that he could move on. Too many times in the church, we don't get healing because we refuse to push back the roadblocks that stand in front of us. Why? Because we cannot admit who we are. And until we push that roadblock out of the way and we declare who we are, we stay in the same position on the road. We stay in the very same place on the road because we can't admit. We can't come face to face with who we are. Why? Because we don't want to articulate it. We don't want to say it. We don't want to admit to it. We don't want to believe that it's true. For when we cover something up, we're able to push it aside and say, okay, well, maybe that didn't really happen. Maybe it wasn't as bad as we thought. We have a tendency to pacify. It's not as bad. It's, yeah, well, you know, I just told a few lies. It's no big deal. Yeah, I may have caused some pain, but it's no big deal. We pacify the fact that we are sinners. We pacify the fact that there is no good thing in us. And we don't want to come clean and recognize that this is who I am. This is who I am. It's true. It's true I'm a wretch. It's true that I'm a pathological liar. It's true that I'm a sinner. It's true that there's no good thing in me. We can't get past the roadblock because we refuse to confess who we are. We refuse to acknowledge who we are. But yet we think that we continue to make progress because we are praying and we're doing all the things that we ought to be doing. Yet we can't understand why we're not moving. It's like spinning your wheels on ice. You're expending energy. You're putting out, but yet you're not moving. Why? Because there's a roadblock that you can't get past because you don't admit who you are. The challenge with being on a road and having this roadblock in front of you is that often when we're walking down the road, we can see the target that's ahead. We see the target that's ahead. In other words, we see our Father's house. We're on our way to our Father's house. And we're having conversation with Him. But yet the conversation happens at a distance. See, along the road back to his father's house, Jacob still prayed. Jacob still remembered the fact that he had had an encounter with God. But what Jacob lacked was the experience. What Jacob lacked was the experience. But he gained that experience and he gained some momentum when he recognized who he was and pushed past by acknowledging who he was. In acknowledging who he was, the angel gave him passage and said, "Thy name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel. For a prince hast thou power with God and with men, and hast prevailed. But the power could not come until Jacob was able to admit to who he was, until Jacob could declare who he was. As we said, for many people, walking this walk and walking this walk with the Lord, sometimes there's a roadblock in their way. But if we cannot admit to who we are to get past that roadblock, that roadblock becomes our tombstone. The roadblock becomes the death of us. Even though the Lord is calling us, we refuse to get past this place. Now let me clarify something, because it's not because of an inability to move forward that the roadblock hinders us. It's not because of some kind of disability on our part that we're tripped up by the roadblocks on the way. But it's only because of a choice, of an unwillingness to move forward. It's because of an unwillingness to move, to acknowledge who we are and acknowledge the wrong that we've done. It's only because of an unwillingness to recognize and to declare, to put truth behind it, or put words behind who we are. It's because of an unwillingness to do what we know we must do in order to reach our destination. But remember, we're still on the path. We're still walking this path. But yet, there's a roadblock. We're still walking down this path, but yet, there's something that's stopping us. But as we said, we could see ahead the destination. We could see the destination that is to come, and we're praying just like Jacob prayed to the Father, and we are engaged in a type of relationship. But because we're at a distance, it's nothing but a long-distance relationship. We're engaging with God in a long-distance relationship because we haven't come to the place where He reaches man, where He touches man, where He changes man. We're on the road, but we haven't quite made it there yet. And we see off in the distance the fact that the Lord is calling us to draw closer. But yet the stumbling block stands in our way. We continue to converse, but the one thing that you've got to know about a long-distance relationship is that over time it'll fizzle and fail. Why? Because if there's no intimacy, if there's no coming together, if there's no point of contact, if there's no coming together, then there can be no intimacy. And without intimacy, our relationship will die. So many people are on the road to the Father's house, but have not reached, but are content to have had an encounter. They think that just because they've had an encounter, that they're okay. And that just because they pray and they're making some kind of contact with the Father, they think that they're okay. But yet they have not reached their destination. They have not made it. Why? Because they can't admit to who they are. They can't get past the hurt, to get past who they are, to be able to reach their destination. They can't get past self to be able to get to God. Church, we can't let self stand in the way. We cannot let self stand in the way of us getting closer to the Lord. For we are walking this pathway. We're walking this pathway. We're looking to get somewhere. We're looking to touch heaven. We're looking to touch Christ. We're looking to be in that relationship with Him. But the Bible tells us that there are many who are walking this path who think that they've reached their destination but have not yet made it. The Bible tells us about the fact that there are many who are called but few are chosen. And the Bible goes on to further say that there are many who on the last day or on the day when of judgment will stand before the throne and say, "But Lord, we did all these things in your name. We cast out demons. We did all these things." But He'll say, "Depart from me, ye workers of iniquity. Yet depart from me, I knew you not." Why? Because there was no intimacy. There was no interaction. They had a long-distance relationship with the Lord. Why? Because they allowed themselves to stop them on the road.